Hi everyone, this is Tanya from Flying Dog Studio. Thank you for joining me as I start another Beatrix Potter study piece. Now, this piece is a little bit different than what we have been doing. Some of the things we've been doing have been whimsical realism, some have been impressionism, and this is just straight up realism. There is no inking of this piece. As you can see, I've pre-drawn it. I took my kneaded eraser and kind of knocked back those lines a little bit. I don't want them too dark, and I'm going to tape it down to my desk because this is a postcard size, and when I put the water on it, it's gonna warp it up just a bit. I don't want it too warped. I don't want it curling up on me. So I am using a Winsor Newton mop brush, and then I have some tea. Now this particular piece is a spray of rose hips, and I wish I had thought about it. I had some chai tea, a bag that had burst on us, and we couldn't use it in just dipping down and making tea, so I decided to save it and use it for this. But we did have some rosehip tea on hand, and I could have used that on my paper. If you are new to watching my Beatrix Potter series, I do like to start with a wash of tea to kind of age the paper just a bit to make it look a bit more like hers, and then I get started with the watercolor. I'm using a size 6 round from the Winsor and Newton series for that watercolor brush. I have an extra piece of paper just in case I want to test some colors. I have a glass of water, and you saw at the beginning I have a microfiber cloth, and these are my Winsor and Newton watercolors. Now this is just a little tin that I put them in. I liked it better than the travel set that it came in, and I have a better area to mix with. And then I have my cheat sheet, as I like to call it, where I have pre-swatched the colors. Just in case I forget to tell you what colors I am using, those will be on the screen. You can see we're starting with some permanent sap green. I'm wanting to start with the greenery on this. And I'm going to tell you a little bit, while we're mixing the colors here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this piece. If you're interested in studying some of Beatrix Potter's pieces with me or on your own, and then you can find those at the Victoria and Albert Museum website, and I will have that listed down below. But I looked this one up because just looking at it, honestly, I mean, maybe it's just me not knowing particular flora and fauna that are out there in the world, but this particular plant, I didn't know what it was. I had never seen a rose hip before, so I went to the website and looked it up because you can tap on the pictures and find out all the information about them. And this is listed as a spray. It says a watercolor drawing of a spray of rose hips, watercolor and pencil on paper by Beatrix Potter, 1878 or 1879. It says this is watercolor over pencil drawing. And she has quite a few of those on there. Now, if you go on to the Victoria and Albert website and take a look at all the pieces she has, there are literal hundreds of pieces on there. This particular piece was given by the Lender Collection, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it had been a long-term loan to the Victoria and Albert Museum, and it was part of the Lender Trust. And I believe, if memory serves me, there were around 300 pieces in this collection. So tremendous number of Beatrix Potter pieces on the website. If you want to take a look, it's hard for me to choose just one, so I'm not going to run out of material anytime soon. So what we are doing here, mixing the colors, you saw that I had several greens that I've mixed up there. I am using that Payne's Gray to get the blue-green in this piece, and I thought I would start with just a light wash on things and then come back and add the detail once it has dried. Now, I do have to warn you in this video, if you've watched my videos before, you know, oh, there's thunder. I don't know if you can hear that on your end, but we are getting a little thunderstorm here. But if you've watched my videos before, you know, there are always interruptions in my videos. That's why I do my voiceovers. On this particular day, we had an appliance breakdown. In particular, it was a washing machine. It's never good when you go in and find a major appliance sitting in a pool of water while it is plugged into the wall. So my husband was working on some plumbing because we were expecting a new washing machine to come, and we already had that one moved out, and I knew he was in with a hacksaw, so occasionally you will see me go off the screen and then come back on. So whenever he said, "Hey Ton, I could use your help," I would quickly get off and go in. So this took me 2 days. It should have taken me about 20 minutes, but it took me a little bit longer because, life happens. So I do apologize for all the breaks in it, but I am going to make it through almost all these little leaves. And all we're doing is we're going back and forth. This is wet on dry. Everything is dry. The tea that I put on there, I think I only had to put on 2 coats, and I let it dry between each coat on these. I used my hair dryer, got it nice and dry, and you can see I got a good amount of tea on there. So this was a little bit darker than it actually meant for it to be, but in the end it gave it that old look. So I was glad I had a little bit more on there than what I had anticipated. Now, on Miss Potter's work, I studied her realistic pieces, and basically they are the same as her whimsical realism or her impressionism. She uses the same type of brush technique, or at least it seems so to me. If you're aware of Miss Potter's technique, then please put that down in the comments below, because I would love to learn. I'm really wanting to emulate her style, so help me out here if you know how it's done. Now, she uses what I like to call a dry brush technique. So we're working wet on dry, and the only water I have in my brush, you'll see me go to the left hand side of the screen just like then. That is when I'm wiping my brush to make certain I don't have too much water on it, because I'm wanting to be precise with my colors. So this was kind of tricky because these were small, and this is postcard size, and it's a size 6 brush, and that's the size I got to work on a postcard. So it's working out pretty well, but I am going to have to switch over to another brush toward the end. So hang on, and I'll explain more about that brush. One thing that I did want to mention on this, when you're putting the colors down, you can see I'm going back and forth. I am dropping colors in. There I go. I had more of an olive green on that leaf, and then I picked up some blue green and tapped around on it. Because it's still wet, it allows those colors to move together. So that is something that she used quite a bit in her pieces. I did a study earlier on in this series, and I will link the series down below, my postcard series and the Beatrix Potter series, so you can take a look at those. But I did an onion, and she liked to put colors down where they would kind of blend in together, kind of move around and fill in those colors. So that's what I'm doing here. Your color has to be wet. Now this is 100% cotton cold press paper, and I'll have that link down below as well, so you can see this is my favorite paper to use, and it's kind of expensive, but because I do smaller pieces, it lasts me forever. I still have like 9 or 10 sheets left, and I've done a bunch of pieces off of it. So my favorite paper, and because it's 100% cotton, it allows me to move the color around a little bit differently. So paper matters if you're going to do this kind of art. So I'm going to be quiet here and let you watch me drop in these colors, and I'll hop back on in a minute and we'll talk some more. So I'm about to hop off here on this part, and it's a good stopping point for me as I go in and check on my husband and make sure he hasn't lost any digits. But it allows me to let the paper dry. So now it has dried, and I'm coming back on and I'm re-wetting my colors, and we're going to do a little bit of the detail. And I have missed a few of the leaves on here. Did not notice them. They are kind of blending in with the little berries, so the little rose hips, and so I'm going to have to come back and do those in just a minute. But you can see I'm using the same color, and when you layer, some artists call it glazing, but I'm going to call it layering. When you layer, even though it's the same color I had down there, it's going to darken it just a bit. And that is something that Miss Potter used quite a bit in her art. She's layering those colors, and you can layer the same color on top and just get a little bit darker version to give you those shadows and to give you that 3-dimension. Now, this was a very soft use of color. She does not put a great detail, while it is realism, she does not put a great detail on the veins in those leaves, so I did not do that either. I left them as they were. There's just a faint line on some of them. I especially like these little leaves here on the end because their little vein going through the middle was a darker green, and I love the color of them, so I thought that stood out very well. But that's what we're going to be doing on this part, and you'll see me hop on, I think, somewhere in the end of this little section before we start on the berries themselves, and I will get those leaves painted in. They are on this stem actually that I'm working on right now. They're on the opposite side of it. So I'm going to hop off again, and I'll hop back on in just a second. So I am finishing up all of these little leaves, and it was a little break, and this is when I realized I had not painted in these leaves. And I do a little bit of a cheat here. Instead of putting a light wash on and then coming back and adding the detail, I decide, since these are basically, and I don't know if it was the quality of the photograph on the website or the age of the piece, but I can't really see any detail. There's not a lot of color change on them. So I just go ahead and drop the colors in wet, and we're gonna leave them at that. And then we're gonna go ahead and start on the rest of the piece. But I do make sure those are dry, so I'm going to start on the other side painting the berries so I don't run them into my leaves that are still a little wet. For the color of these, we're going to rely on that alizarin crimson, and I have the cadmium free yellow. That's my favorite yellow. I think I use that on almost every piece. I love the cadmium free yellow. These berries had a bit of an orange undertone, then they had a medium red, and then you're going to see me come back and add the darker red on top that's almost a purple. So I'm going to start with the orange on one end while everything's still wet. I'm going to add the red on the other end and just let them mix together in the middle, and that will give me some nice brightness and some highlights on there. Now, these berries did not have any really white spots on there. Some areas were a lighter orange where you're going to get that reflection of light. So I didn't come back and be very specific about putting white on there, or leaving a white spot. And if you have seen my Molotow video, you know I'm not going to be using any Molotow to save my spot on there for a highlight because I do not have good luck with that. So I'm going to continue painting these, and once they're dry, I'm going to come back and add all of that detail on there. The berries are finished, and I'm going to let those completely dry. They are completely dry now. And then I'm adding a little bit of burnt umber to that alizarin crimson. That is going to give me, in person, it's really hard to see on the screen here, but in person, it almost has a little bit of a purple tint to it. It adds a nice dark berry color, and you're going to see that I go back and I hit that orange again to kind of let those blend together because I want to keep that shininess, and it gives it a round feel on the berry. So you have to be careful how you lay it down. Think about keeping it round at the end and working that together, and then that is going to give you a roundness on the berry. Are finishing up the second coat on these berries, and then I'm gonna let it dry. It has fully dried, and I'm coming back and mixing up some more colors for the third layer. And you see I'm starting with some alizarin crimson, and I'm adding burnt sienna to that. You know, previously I had used the burnt umber, but the burnt sienna has kind of an orange tone, and remember we used some orange in the original on this and then in the second layer. So we're going to do that again. And I'm doing that again. I'm making another spot of the alizarin crimson and the burnt sienna, but I also had that Payne's gray. And I know for some people you may wonder, why does she separate her colors like that and then mix them together completely anyway? I want to make certain I don't have too much Payne's gray. Payne's gray is a pain if you get too much of it on there. And I put a little Payne's gray in because I wanted to create more of a purple tone. And now we are using the burnt sienna and that alizarin crimson because the bottom parts of those berries have that orange tone to them. We want to keep that, and you can see how it has created a highlight mark for me on there. So that was the whole purpose for that. Now I do have to apologize. Coming up, we are going to have a break again in this, and I will finish it the second day. And what I am finishing are the little tips on those berries, the little dark fringy things on them. And I apologize for not knowing all of my botany terms. I should, because I was a biology major, but that's been a long time ago, so I don't remember. But you're going to see a break in it, and then the quality of the film is going to change. I don't know what happened. I had it at 4K. It was running at what I always have it as. I hit start, and somewhere in the middle of the video, it switched. After about 50 something seconds, it switched speeds and it slowed it down. And something that only took me about 4 minutes to do ended up taking 19 minutes on film, and I had no idea. So my daughter ran it through some video editing and she did a good job, but it's not the same quality. But hang on at the very end and I will have a still of the piece when it is completely finished. This is the point where the video quality is going to change, but it is also the point where we're working on the last bit of this piece. And this is the brush change. This is a travel brush. This came with the set of Winsor and Newton paints that you see on the right hand side of the screen. The size 6 has worked perfectly for me until now, but those are very tiny. And I would say that that travel brush is probably a size 2, maybe. I'm not certain. But in the past, I've never used them because I like something a little larger. But I needed this brush for that. Even holding my size 6 on a point, I could not get those fine lines. I am using the size 6 to mix my paint because that little brush would take forever. So I have my paint, and now we're going to go back to that smaller brush and get all of those details in. I'm starting with the dark color because I didn't want to use black, and these weren't really black. They had sort of a blue tone to them. So I have created that color. They also had at the very, very tips of these kind of a brown shade. So you're going to see me pick up some brown and add that in while those are still wet so that everything will blend together. It's the same technique that she's used through this entire piece. So we're just going to pick it up on this part of the piece as well. Well, if you have made it to this point and suffered through my comedy of errors trying to get through this piece while we were installing plumbing and a new washing machine, I thank you so very, very much. I do hope that you will join me as I take this technique and add it to my own work in the next video, because we have some wild blueberries, not blueberries, they're blackberries, some wild blackberries growing in our yard along our fence, and these squirrels have absolutely loved them. They're a little too tart for us, so we have not eaten them, but I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to try this technique on my own work and my own reference photo. And I will put that reference photo when I do the piece. I will put that on my blog, and if you want to follow along, if you check out some of my other pieces and you want to follow along, I do have my own art and my own reference pieces up there and my own line drawings. You're welcome to download those and use those in your own art. Feel free to do that. I do not mind that at all. I consider this channel a place where we are learning together, and I am happy to share my art and I am happy to share my reference photos. So use those and let's make some art together. Coming up in just a few seconds is going to be the final look at this piece, and it will be a better photo for you. I do hope you'll check out the other videos in this series, and until then, I will see you in the next one.